Good evening, everyone. So, today we'll be discussing the recently published uh, EULAR recommendations for intra-articular therapies. So, just a brief introduction. So, intra-articular therapy is a key for treating adults with joint synovitis, effusion, and pain of different origins, such as inflammatory arthritis and osteoarthritis. The common injectables which we use include the glucocorticoids, local anesthetics, hyaluronic acid, autologous blood product, that is plasma-rich, platelet-rich plasma, and radiopharmaceuticals. There's a wide variation in the way the intra-articular therapies are used and delivered in patients with arthropathies. This is the reason to address this issue, the ULAR established a task force with the aim of developing evidence-based recommendation to help guide the health professional who administer intra-articular therapies. They formed a task force which established five overarching principles and 11 recommendations which should be followed in the daily clinical practice. So they took into account while forming these recommendations, they took into account the patient information, procedure and setting, the accuracy, routine and special antiseptic care, safety, precautions, efficacy, safety of repeated joint injection, and the use of local anesthetics and aftercare. So this is these are the overarching principles which have been laid out by the task force, which we'll be discussing one by one. So out of the fourth and the fifth point are straightforward. That is, it should be offered in the frame of full individualized information and a shared decision-making process. And a variety of health professionals perform this procedure routinely, which include orthopedic, the rheumatologists, the general practitioners, the orthopedics, and trauma surgeons. So the first overarching principle is that the intra-articular therapies are recommended and widely used in the management of joint disease. So that is definitely correct, and it should be given according to the best practice. The best practice is the best available recommendations and the best antiseptic precautions to be taken. Dose and approach need to be defined for each indication and joint, and might not be interchangeable across indications. So the ULR laid down the indications which we for which we usually give the intra-articular therapies, that is knee osteoarthritis. So here we use glucocorticoids for acute exacerbation of knee pain, especially if it is accompanied by effusion. That is inflammatory OA, if we can call it otherwise. Hyaluronic acid is it is not proven to be highly effective in knee OA, but the size effect is relatively small, and suitable patients are not well defined, and pharmacoeconomic aspects of the treatment are not well established. It is a definitely a costly affair. Gout is a recommended first line for acute flares are colchicine, followed by oral corticosteroids or articular aspiration, that's the third choice, and then injection of corticosteroid. Rheumatoid arthritis, definitely daily on a daily basis we see these patients with flare. And first is the adjustment of therapy. The approach would be adjustment of therapy with the dose or route of administration, change in the medication, or intra-articular injection in the presence of one or few residual active joints. And then hand osteoarthritis, it should not be generally done in hand OA patient, but may be considered in patient with painful interphalangeal joints. And for acute or recent onset swelling of the knee, intra-articular steroid should be administered unless an appropriate diagnosis has been made and contraindication have been ruled out. And apart from these, other indications are tenosynovitis. We give for carpal tunnel, and that tenosynovitis, like I mentioned. So there's a dose for each joint, and the set means the range. It should be for definitely followed while giving these in OPD. So this is from proximal to distal shoulder. Usually is 20 to 40 mg. Anesthetic dose, that is injectable lidocaine, which we use, should be 5 ml along with the.
Tanmay,
Yes, sir.
20 to 40 milligram of what?
Sir,
Triamcinolone or methylprednisolone?
Triamcinolone, sir. Triamcinolone.
What the recommendation is talking about triamcinolone hexacetonide or methylprednisolone, because that availability is also an issue. We don't have triamcinolone
Yes, sir.
hexacetonide, and it is not available. It was not available in UK also at some for a long time.
Yes, sir. So this is sir actually not from the recommendations. This is means which we use means routinely in the OPD. So it's got from one of the articles. So they have not given the dose for every joint,
Well,
but this is what
okay,
we
ULR,
usually.
ULR recommendation doesn't mention
No,
how
no, no,
much you should give.
no, 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 sir.
This is the convention. Yes.
Convention,
Okay.
yes, sir. Yes,
So this applies to triamcinolone,
yes, sir.
and
Triamcinolone,
probably it applies to methylprednisolone also.
methylprednisolone also. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So yeah, okay, sir. So the hip is not included, but for hip also 40 to 80 is recommended, and for knee up to 80 is recommended, but usually 40 to 60 is used in the OPD. And for the elbow, wrist, and the ankles, 20 to 40 maximum, not more than that. So, coming on to the next overarching principle, the aim of the intra-articular therapy is to improve patient-centered outcomes. So, patient-centered outcomes are those which are relevant to the patient, such as benefits, harms, preferences, or implications for self-management. So, while injectables are used mainly to improve patient-centered outcome, they can also be used to aid diagnosis and identify the origin of pain. That is, a example is a lidocaine test, which may be used to rule out joint pain versus referred pain. So contextual factors are important and contribute to the effect of intra-articular therapy. So factors such as effective communication, patient expectations, or the setting in which the procedure takes place, it may influence the outcome of intra-articular therapy. And additionally, one should recognize the magnitude of the placebo effect associated with this route of delivery. So definitely in patients of osteoarthritis, means the placebo effect is more as compared to rheumatoid arthritis, but definitely it works because of the inflammatory nature. And the others are the it should be offered in the frame of full individualized information and a shared decision making process. This we have already discussed. And like I said, it is given. It is the intra-articular therapy is used by professionals, which include rheumatologists, practitioners, sports medicine specialists, radiologists, nuclear medicines, nurses, physicians, and so on. So, overarching principles we have discussed. Now, coming on to the recommendations. So, they have laid down 11 recommendations with different grades of approval. So, we'll be discussing these recommendations in detail now. So, the grade D, which you can see, is usually based on the expert opinion, means on the OPD daily OPD basis, what the clinicians or the physicians have noticed, which works well for the patient. So that is given the grade D. So first thing is the patient must be fully informed of the nature of the procedure, the injectable and the potential benefits and risks, and informed consent should be obtained and documented according to the local habits. So this is one of the most important points. It should be explained in detail as to why it is being given, what is, how does it work, and the benefits and risks involved, and the post-procedure care and everything should be documented. And as mentioned, local habits means according to your hospital, the consent taking activity it should be done. And second is the an optimal setting for intra-articular therapy includes a professional, clean, quiet, private, well-lighted room. The patient in an appropriate position, preferably lying down position. Knee injections can also be done in the sitting position, and even for shoulder, it can be done in the sitting position. And it should be ideally on a couch, examining tables, easy to lie flat. Equipment for aseptic procedures, aid from another professional, and resuscitation equipment close by in case of any anaphylactic reactions. Uh, the third is accuracy depends on the joint route of entry and health professional expertise. If available, imaging guidance, for example, ultrasound may be used to improve accuracy. So, several published systemic reviews and randomized controlled trials report that ultrasound improves accuracy in delivery of intra-articular therapy. Though clinical outcomes are similar to those of landmark guided therapies. So wherever available, ultrasound should be used because it is much more gives a much more clearer view of the joint space and decreases the risk. Means if you are new to this, definitely it will help regarding the procedure. And the best approach for certain joint cannot be recommended, except for the knee, in which systemic review showed that the superolateral approach was more common and resulted in the highest pooled accuracy rate of 91%. And apart from this, aspiration of synovial fluid helps ensure that the needle is in the joint. So this is the common practice which we do while injecting a joint. The first thing is to make sure that it is in the synovial cavity, and the best way is to aspirate synovial fluid. If you see a straw colored yellow color fluid, so definitely it is inside the joint rather than seeing blood. During pregnancy, when injecting a joint, one has to take into account whether the compound is safe for mother and the baby both. So during pregnancy, it is often performed to treat local arthritis when indicated, and the benefit to risk ratio in the setting may be superior to that for systemic therapy because not many medications can be given safely during this crucial time. So definitely this can help. And most of the compounds in routine practice can be used except for radiopharmaceuticals, which are contraindicated during pregnancy.
Is there any comment on early pregnancy, late pregnancy, Tanmay?
No, sir.
See, from any injectable procedure, particularly with the steroid, which can alter the hormone levels. If it is a very early pregnancy, we are generally jittery because if an abortion happens after the early an injection, then probably the gynecologist, everybody is likely to blame us.
Yes, sir.
So I'm comfortable giving an intraarticular injection second trimester, third trimester, which we give routinely. I'm distinctly uncomfortable during the first trimester because abortions are anyway common during first trimester. And steroid, intraarticular bolus steroid definitely interface with the hormonal balance.
Yes.
So increase steroid, and with the steroids effect on estrogen, progesterone, all this combo can be altered significantly. So there's a small chance. Even the acupuncture, people generally say early pregnancy, avoid acupuncture. So there is one school of thought say that it can induce abortions. So I would be little jittery, but anyways, okay when it is officially not contraindicated, but you have to be little careful during that period.
First trimester. Yes.
First trimester, yeah. If you what I'm telling can be graded as grade D.
Okay, sir.
Something
Yes,
like that.
yes, sir. Expert opinion,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
So aseptic technique should always be undertaken when performing intra-articular therapy. So, from a very large study, the risk of septic arthritis following the intra-articular therapy was very low. That is 0.035%. It was based on a study with 7,900 procedures. So, for this surgical gloves, skin preparation with alcohol or iodine disinfectant or chlorhexidine, and changing needles between drawing the drug and injecting into the joint are indirectly supported by their benefit in other common procedures such as blood cultures and surgery. So,
Yes. So this is very important,
yes, sir.
Tanmay.
Yes, sir.
So a lot of people, they even our nurses, they sometimes they keep the lignocaine for days together.
Yes, sir.
So they once any sterile bottle has been punctured, it is no more sterile.
Yes, sir.
So once the needle comes out, then another needle goes in, then it's no more a sterile container. So we cannot reuse unless you have series of within 1 hour, one more planned. Then you can use the same lignocaine, but we have to leave the needle inside.
Yes, sir.
So whether there is any increased risk, probably no. People who have reused, nothing happens because lignocaine itself has got some kind of a stabilizer,
Yes, sir.
which has got antibacterial property. So bacteria don't grow easily in xylocaine preparations.
Yes, sir.
But
Yes, sir.
but it is a good practice to moment you use the needle, you draw the xylocaine and leave the needle there, or discard that needle and use another needle to draw triamcinolone.
Yes, sir.
So use two different needles for two different bottles and discard that needle and use another needle to inject. So that is a good practice. When whatever we can do, we have done sterile practice,
Yes, sir.
right? That's very important because many times people forget on this.
And also, so there were certain comments on lidocaine that it prevents crystallization. Means when we inject, it should be definitely used along with the steroid, and it prevents crystallization. It also prevents the chance of getting infection, because definitely steroids, they, if injected, if there is a focus anywhere, it may cause infection. But lignocaine, like you said, it stabilizes and forms a protection. I mean, gives a protection against infection if it is given.
That, the EULAR guidelines has been talking about it.
No, sir. This is from a recent article from Up to Date, so I got
Yeah,
it. So,
yeah. So this is a more of a evidence experience based. People use, instead of xylocaine, we use xylocard.
right.
We use I particularly use the intravenous preparation of lignocaine rather than
Oh, sir.
subcutaneous preparation or other, what is it, xylocaine, which contains paraben as a stabilizer, multi-use vial, which contains paraben. So lot of people get allergy to paraben rather than lignocaine.
Okay.
So from a pain textbook, I have learned that giving lignocaine rather than lignocard, if it comes lignocard, it is intravenous preparation of lignocaine, is safer and doesn't produce any anaphylactic reaction. So since I have switched over, I have not had any problems with anybody getting itching or anaphylaxis after intraarticular injections. And the solution also has got some antiseptic properties, so that might contribute to prevention of infections, but it doesn't absolve us from preparing the skin well,
Yes,
having a no-touch technique.
definitely.
Go ahead.
Yes. So, like we were discussing, the patient should be offered local anesthetic, explaining pros and cons. So, the main reason for using local anesthetic are to reduce discomfort during the procedure and to extend the pain reduction effect. They may be applied to the skin, infiltrated in the subcutaneous tissue along the needle path into the joint, or injected into the joint alone, or mixed with the glucocorticoids. And patient should be asked about previous allergic events prior to the procedure. And from the literature, several RCTs, knee and hip OA, have shown that a combination of glucocorticoids and local anesthetic improves pain longer than only injecting local anesthetic. Diabetic patients, there's a different class which need to be taken care, and we need to be vigilant while giving them injection, especially those with suboptimal control. They should be informed about the risk of transient increased glycemia following intraarticular steroid injection, and they are advised about the need to monitor glucose levels, particularly from first to third day. So it can provoke transient hyperglycemia. One systemic review of critically low quality, including 76 patients, showed that the blood glucose levels increased during the day 1 to day 3 post injection, though no severe events such as hyperosmolar hypoglycemic state or ketoacidosis were noted. So definitely day 1 to 3, we should ask them to be careful. If they have a home monitoring kit, so definitely they can do home monitoring. And if they're uncontrolled, so we can ask them to, if it is absolutely required, ask them to check on the second or third day if possible. So another RCT showed that extended release triamcinolone acetonide may increase glycemia less than the standard triamcinolone acetonide, that is 14.7 milligrams per deciliter versus 33.9. And so it could be an alternative for poorly controlled diabetic patients. And none of the studies on intraarticular glucocorticoids in patients with diabetics reported post-procedure infection. So that is a good thing. So
That's reassuring.
yes, sir, definitely. Coming on to the eighth recommendation, so intraarticular therapy is not contraindicated. Is not a contraindication in people with clotting or bleeding disorders or taking antithrombotic medication, unless the bleeding risk is very high. So based on 7 observational studies, The estimated peri-procedural bleeding risk in patients on antithrombotic drugs, that is antiplatelets, low molecular weight heparin, warfarin, or direct oral anticoagulants, was found to be between 0 and 2%. So we have a lot of patients who might be on anti-platelets, specifically IHD patients or warfarin with other complications. So this has shown that the bleeding risk is quite low. We need not be too much worried regarding the bleeding risks. And in another large retrospective study, no bleeding was reported in around 1,000 procedures performed in 483 patients on rivaroxaban, apixaban, or dabigatran. So this is a neural anticoagulant. So there also the risk of bleeding was almost nil.
Yeah. So what you need to do is you have to see if the procedure is expected to be traumatic. If you want to aspirate
Yes, sir.
for a long time, then there's a small increase in risk of bleeding. But if it is a swift injection, use a thinnest needle and try to get into the joint without traumatizing anywhere. Go aspirate, inject, and come back. It's pretty safe.
Yes, sir.
We have injected for a lot of patients who are on oral anticoagulants. So they are so far nothing happens. Only some people knee injection. Sometimes you can give them a crib bandage, some kind of gives a compression. That is, I think, not required, but a lot of people do it.
Okay.
So Tanmay, do they talk about checking the INR before?
No, sir. No mention of means any pre-procedural investigations. So
Because when I was a resident like you, I was asked to review data on intraarticular injection in anticoagulated patients, and the final conclusion was that you should do an INR before the procedure, and the INR should be in the therapeutic range. So if you're expecting it to be between 2 to 3, it can be 2 to 3, but it has to be 2 to 3, not 4, 5, 6, because higher the INR, higher is the risk of bleeding. This was the conclusion many years ago when I did a literature search.
This makes a lot of sense, and I think that we should.
yes, sir.
That could
I
be a
have
take-home
always
point.
done.
Yeah.
All see, two things I always do is diabetics. I ask them to do a blood sugar.
Yes, sir.
Now, whether the intraarticular steroid increases the sugar or not, the risk of infection may be higher in an uncontrolled diabetes. That's my thinking. So that's why I don't do it if the sugars are, say, for example, HbA1c is 12, 13, very high uncontrolled diabetes. People I avoid. The other is this, I always check the INR. And if it is in the therapeutic range, as Dharmanand said, single go technique, only once poking, not too many times. Make sure you don't hit the periosteum. That's the main thing.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. So coming on to the next point.
Hey, the previous go to the point 8.
Yes, sir.
Bleeding. Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So the next point, it is also an important point. So it states that the intra-articular therapy may be performed at least 3 months prior to joint replacement surgery, and may be performed after joint replacement surgery. Following consultation with the surgical team is absolutely necessary. So the rate of prostatic infection 3 months after surgery was significantly larger in groups that had injections 0 to 3 months prior to total hip or knee arthroplasty, but not if the injections were separated from the surgery longer than 3 months. So based on this, they have recommended that at least there should be a gap of more than 3 months or more than 3 months between the surgery and intra-articular injection. And based on evidence from 2 other studies, intra-articular glucocorticoid injections in prosthetic joints should be avoided in routine practice and considered by orthopedic surgeons after strict screening of prosthetic infection.
Yeah, I think it's very important because if there's a prosthetic joint, don't do it at all. Give it off to the orthopedic surgeon. Let them take them into the OT under proper sterilized technique. Generally we don't inject, it's mainly aspiration to rule out sepsis and other things.
Yes, sir.
So the best is to ask the orthopedic people to do it in the OT, minor OT or something under strict aseptic technique. I think that's the most important thing.
Yes.
And osteoarthritis, especially ones who are contemplating TKRs, always
Don't
ask
inject.
them whether you're going to go for a replacement in the next 3 months. I always do this. If they say no, only then I inject.
Yes, sir. Definitely. So the next one, the shared decision to re-inject a joint should take into consideration benefits from previous injections and other individualized factors like treatment options, compound used, systemic treatment, and comorbidities. So comorbidities definitely, if a patient is diabetic, so we should be careful of that factor. As such, there are no clear evidence-based recommendation as to the appropriate number of intra-articular injections from a risk-benefit perspective for most indications. But a general accepted rule, though based on no research evidence, is to avoid more than 3 to 4 injections in the same joint per year.
See, if you ask our old generation, so the generation before biologicals, my teacher generations, they always say not more than 3 injections in a weight bearing joint, and they say there is no restriction for injecting into non weight bearing joint. That is the standard teaching by the clinicians who were using this technique on a very regular basis prior to biological era, probably even prior to methotrexate era. So that's a good rule. But most of the time, you don't need to inject more than 3 times a year anyway with the current medications.
Yes, sir.
But a weight bearing joint, don't inject more than 3. Non weight bearing joint, absolutely required, we can.
And Tanmay, is there anything to say how soon can you inject an already injected joint? Say I injected a joint today. How
Yes, sir.
soon
How-
can you inject it again?
Re-injection duration, sir, was not mentioned, but based on the frequency which they have given, so 3 to 4 months gap should be there. So
Because there are some people now who would have,
yes, sir.
I mean, today the boy injected, he had taken intrathecal injection, felt better, stopped DMARDs, came back with a huge effusion.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes we do, but general recommendation is 3 months gap.
3 months.
Is
Yeah,
a
I've got the
is
3 month
a
rule.
more a conventional rule rather than any evidence-based
Yeah, yeah.
rule. That goes well with this recommendation, 3 to 4 per year recommendation. But as Ramesh tells many a times, particularly the reactive arthritis, seronegative spondyloarthritis boys, we aspirate and inject. They come back within 1.5 to 2 months again with a huge swelling, where there's no other option but to re-aspirate and inject.
Yes, sir. So one study was done, means which included 140 patients of osteoarthritis. So there they studied a regimen. So they were injected every 12 weeks for 2 years. And at the end, they noted, means benefit-wise, it was not very beneficial. In fact, it was detrimental for
Detrimental.
osteoarthritis. But regarding adverse effects, they did not notice any major adverse effects with that frequency. So definitely every 12 weeks means which comes to 3 months. So it can be given. The frequency can be every 3 months, like you also follow. So
Anmay, what is the risk of giving more frequently that they are worried about?
that means the sir
By weight bearing joint,
cartilage,
that
yes, sir.
difference is.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Why are they worried about, say, the weight bearing
The
joint getting
cartilage
multiple?
thinning, sir, means it's detrimental to the cartilage. So
Mhm.
that was the adverse effect because of which they stopped the study. I mean, they did not recommend it beyond 2 years.
Okay. There's also some kind of concern that, and this is largely from the orthopedic side, that when they go into a joint that's been had multiple injection, they find that the bone's more fragile in the subchondral area. I mean, yeah, it's difficult to find a study that documents this in a very scientific way, you know. So you will find that the frequency of injections from the orthopedic side itself has come down worldwide after they started doing more knee replacements.
Okay, sir.
The concern is that there, in the knee, for example, or the hip for that matter, if there is frequent injection, the subchondral bone will be osteoporotic. When they go in to try and put in the new prostheses, they find that the bone is fragile. And that's a concern that they've been mentioning in the last 10, 12 years. They had one study, I think they published, but a pretty small one about 9 years ago, and didn't quite kind of, there was no clear documentation. I don't remember, which journal it was in.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So the last recommendation is avoid overuse of injected joints for 24 hours following intra-articular therapy. However, immobilization is discouraged. So this is a common question from the patients as to whether they need bed rest or they can do the routine activities. So studies have shown that 24 to 48 hour post-injection immobilization such as bed rest, joint splinting or bandages had no benefit compared with normal activity after intra-articular therapy even when the injecting radioisotopes. So definitely we can ask our patients to be mobile like we do advise on the daily practice that they can carry on with their activities means with but not very aggressively. The routine activities definitely can be carried out.
I recommend them to stay off work and be mobile at home, but don't do any extra activities. Don't go for a shopping.
Yes, sir.
I mean, this more convention
Yes,
and
sir.
Me too. I would just say 24-hour rest, not absolute rest, as
relative
Dharmanand.
rest.
Yeah.
Relative rest.
So, sir,
Is there any point on whether we should aspirate if a joint is tense? Does it make a difference whether aspirating and injecting or just injecting?
no, sir, they haven't mentioned about the aspiration part or the test which need to be done. So I think we'll have to cover it.
Tests are this depends upon what you suspect.
Yes,
That's
sir.
a totally different ball game.
Yes, sir. So,
But most of us feel that a tense joint should be aspirated because the aspiration itself provides a huge relief.
yes, sir.
And then after that you inject. Then the relief is at least instantaneous, quick, and probably it lasts more. That's what we feel because even the tense joint it kind of causes kind of transient ischemia to the structures, stretched synovium, and maybe subchondral tissues. That can be relieved quickly by doing a good aspiration.
Yes, sir.
That's what we all practice, but I don't think there is a huge evidence for that. But there are some evidence, I mean, earlier studies to say that aspirating and injecting prolongs the amount of time they can remain without reaspiration or repeat injections. Earlier literature, I mean, good, you have to go to literature from 80s, 70s, 80s.
So, but if there are repeated means if the collection is repeat means it is again and again collecting. So, what can be done in such conditions?
We have to I mean, that is again a problem. If you have to optimize your DMRDs, and if in spite of everything, one joint keeps coming again and again, there are other quite a few techniques. Radioisotope can be injected to cause radiosynovectomy, and surgical synovectomy also can be tried. And there are patients sometimes, despite all these things, they keep coming. So we have patients the last 7-8 years, every 6 months, 7 months, one aspiration injection. There are people who went on like this. That patients number has come down after availability of much more effective drugs.
Okay, sir. Sir, here complete the recommendation in the principles.
There is no recommendation on radioactive isotope separately.
No, sir. No, sir.
What about individual agents like hyaluronic acid? What is the exact role?
So role means only in the means there's just given information that it is not very beneficial. Means it's not beneficial as such, but can be given as a treatment option. It's not a first choice, but can be considered in osteoarthritis. And same thing they have mentioned about platelet-rich plasma. So means it is not actually recommended, but as a last resort can be considered.
I think those things we might find it in recommendations in osteoarthritis knee.
Yes,
Other
sir.
than this,
Yes, sir.
Osteoarthritis in the American College, they are actually recommendation is against hyaluronic acid and against all the other therapies. Actually, if
PRP
you
is also.
go by evidence, strong evidence, nothing is there. But most of the like pain community recommendations have these PRPs, hyaluronic acids. So depending upon which society brings on, American society always goes by published evidence and go by RCTs.
Yes, sir.
So most of the American College of Rheumatology OA treatment, except NSAID and knee replacement, there is no even exercise is mildly effective. There's no other recommendation. Everything is recommended against. But European ones, they take expert opinion also.
Yes, sir.
So they give some recommendation, which sometimes we need few tools to deal with the patients. Like one, you told about lignocaine therapy to assess whether the pain is coming from intra-articular or extra-articular. I don't know whether Tanmay remember, or we have done it for 2-3 patients.
Yes, sir. Yes.
When the pain is significantly there, they have moderate osteoarthritis, and giving an intra-articular lignocaine, about 10 ml inside the joint, and assessing them after 15-20 minutes gives them a very good indication how much of the pain is from the joint and how much is from the joint. If the pain has not gone at all, then probably intra-articular source is less likely. So we have to start looking other causes, from anywhere from the tendons to bursa. So many other options will go, including fibromyalgia. So that can be useful. These are the things which we use sometimes,
Yes.
but not routinely.
Tanmay, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Sure.
See, you mentioned about the magnitude of placebo effect. And I was wondering if you came across any study where actually they mentioned the percentage of placebo benefit, because there have been randomized control studies, small ones, both for intra-articular knee injections of steroid as well as hyaluronic.
I haven't looked into the latest, but definitely, sir, I'll look into it.
There's something for you to look at.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
The last time I looked at it, it was more than like 30-35%. So there's a significant, just the fact that the doctor went in there and did something, a significant benefit there. So look, it's worth looking at it.
Definitely.
There are different schools of thought. Just as a student, I'm telling, there are different schools of thought. And there's one school that has very strong faith in intra-articular injections and so on. I come from a school that does not have much faith in intra-articular injections. So, I have a selection bias for information that supports my bias, right? So it's worth looking at the placebo part.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
Sir, one question from Dr. Avinish is from St. John's.
Yeah.
So, any recommendation on aspirating intra-articular fluid, large swollen joint, to be aspirated completely before injecting, or no difference on effect if it is just given as an injection and not it's aspirated?
I think I did discuss this point.
Yes.
Hope Avanisha is satisfied with there is some evidence to say that aspirating a tense joint gives immediate relief. Maybe at the end of 48 hours, 72 hours, there may not be a difference. But aspirating a tense joint makes huge relief. The patient is immediately better. By the time they're going out of the hospital, they're already happy.
Yes.
If we don't do that, they'll continue to have pain for one more 24, 48 hours. And if there is a lot of fluid and we inject steroid, sometimes steroid itself can crystallize in that fluid and can cause a little bit of irritation and can be a temporary increase in pain. So as I do aspirate, try to tense effusion. If it's a small effusion, I don't aspirate, but tense effusion definitely is.
There is a school of thought also about dilution of what you're injecting if there's a lot of fluid in the joint, And many of our steroids, when you inject 10 ml into the knee, for example, if you've aspirated everything and then subsequently do passive movements, if you have diluted the steroid, distribution is a little different. If there's not much joint fluid and you've injected the concentration, the distribution is a little different. So there's a difference in school. Some people want to empty the joint and inject, and some schools of thought says do not empty it but decrease the tension, so like Dharmanand said, the pain and this thing will be down.
Sir, regarding prolotherapy, could not find much of data on that. So could you please highlight?
See, prolotherapy, these are all in the unproven remedies, right? If you practice only evidence-based medicine, there is no evidence for a lot of things which we do. But when you are exhausted with options, there are few things which you can do. Prolotherapy was very popular in maybe 30s, 40s, 50s. People used to inject phenol into the joints, ligaments. So phenol is gone because it's too irritating. People use hypertonic glucose and lignocaine combination into ligaments into the joints. Sometimes it gives a good result, but again, as Satish was telling, whether how much is placebo, how much is real effect, we don't know. But if you are in a practice, if you want to help your patients, you should have more tools to use. So in that way, prolotherapy is nothing but using phenol, earlier days phenol originally, then subsequently 25% glucose plus lignocaine mixture, inject into tendon insertion areas. The theory behind this, it causes a temporary irritation. That irritation will result in bleeding. That bleeding will cause growth factors to come from the blood, and that growth factors will help in healing. So this is used very widely in sports medicine circles. If you are Virat Kohli or any of the sports people, they would have had these injections very often, and it's considered to be a little more safer than giving a steroid injection into tendon. Particularly, this is useful for ligament attachment points. If somebody has got a severe tenderness in the iliac crest where the muscles or ligaments get attached, that pain is preventing from working. Probably peppering that area with this solution can help in healing. Initially, it can be painful for first few days. And I don't know, Tanmay, you have seen, I have done it for a couple of Achilles insertional tendinitis where there's a huge swelling in the Achilles tendon. Patients have a lot of pain. I've had a decent success with that. It can be very painful injection because you have to give multiple injections into that area, peppering there. But people do get better, and which has not got better for 1 year, 2 years. And after 1 month, they come back and tell that they are much better, and that improvement remains at 6 months. I have to believe that it works. But you can't find an evidence.
What have you injected, Dharmanand? Just needling, huh?
A little bit of hypertonic sugar. See, 50% glucose, right?
Okay.
To take 5 ml of it, or 2 ml of it, and 2 ml of lignocaine.
Okay.
And inject it.
It's peritendinous, huh?
Peritendinous, or we can, because there's no steroid, no, we can go into periosteal, up to periosteum. We can go like a peppering technique, no? Just go into periosteum, just slowly withdraw and inject wherever it goes. And for 24 hours, you have to ask the patient to rest. It can be because it can be irritant, it can be painful, and little bit of cold water compression, all this stuff. And it does help. I've learned it from Pain Clinic in UK. So I've been using once in a while here and there. I've recently used for 7-8 months back. We used for one patient with a good result.
Okay, next time you do it, just call me.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to watch it first.
Sure.
So we complete here.
Okay.
Any questions? Any of one of you can ask.
You can unmute and ask. This is an area where there is not much of evidence, but it is a very important tool in clinical practice. Yes, and patients come with an acute illness. You think of biologicals, but they all take some time to work. So to give immediate relief for the patient, it can be very useful. And I personally feel not injecting a single joint, which is persistently inflamed for long term, it amounts to kind of a negligence, because what happens after some time, 1 year, 2 years down the line, most of the joints are good, but one joint is totally damaged that they'll require a knee replacement surgery. And if that clinician has injected the joint when he found that the joint is refractory, probably you could have preserved the joint for long term. So it is quite obvious, because some of the refractory joint, elbow 20-degree flexion deformity, you have given your methotrexate, they're better, but that one elbow is not responding. Giving an injection within a week, the elbow straightens, that remains straight. If the patient refuses the injection, that ultimately the synovitis settles down with your DMR days, but the flexion deformity persists. So we have to use this tool effectively whenever there is indication. But the amount of steroid, the amount of injections we need to do has significantly come down, in contrast to what was 15-20 years back. 15-20 years back, we used to inject more frequently and more number of joints. So nowadays we are using less and less injections, but for a particular joint, injection can be joint saving.
I agree with you, Dharmanand. Even when you start a biologic, sometimes the biologic fails to work on one resistant joint. I don't stop the biologic calling it a biologic failure. I continue the biologic and just inject the joint. I've done it on quite a few occasions. Or while the patient is on a biologic, there is a flare in a single joint. I don't classify it as a failure of the biologic. I still continue the biologic, but inject the joint.
After ruling out infection, of course.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
We'll stop here, sir.
Yes, there is no queries. Yes.
No questions, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you,
boys.
so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, Tanmay.
Bye, Satish.